Welcome to Living Well with MS. This show comes to you from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, which helps people live a full and healthy life through the Overcoming MS program. We interview a range of experts and people with multiple sclerosis. Please remember, all opinions expressed are their own. Receive monthly tips and ideas about living well with MS by signing up for our newsletter at overcomingms.org/newsletter. And now, let's meet our guest.
Welcome to the latest edition of Living Well with MS. Joining me today is Heather O'Neill. Heather is a clinical social worker and has been working with individuals and couples in private practice and other organisations for the past 27 years. She specialises in treating trauma, coping with chronic illness and anxiety disorders. She was diagnosed with MS in 2020 and found the Overcoming MS program very shortly into her diagnosis. It's given her a tremendous amount of agency over her own health and has allowed her to manage her anxiety related to this illness. Overall, Heather feels healthier and more connected to her body. Heather lives in Denver, Colorado in the US and enjoys spending time with family and friends. She loves skiing, hiking and travelling, and when not out adventuring, she can be found curled up with a good book. So welcome, Heather.
Thanks, it's good to be here.
So to start off with, could you introduce yourself and tell us about your MS journey?
Sure. Well, you noticed that I'm a clinical social worker, so I'm in private practice. I was diagnosed in 2020, so it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I had two teenage kids at home at the time, and we had COVID in our house. And so I really thought I was having COVID because I was having numbness in my toes, and we were hearing all about like COVID toe. And so I was really thinking, oh, like this is something going on with that. So finally got a hold of a doctor, and they ended up getting me in to be seen. So I had numbness in my toes, and then it was starting to move up my feet and into my legs. And so I got to see a doctor in person, which was kind of a gift during the pandemic. That was like a lot of messing around to get there. And what I now know, they did a neurological exam. At the time, I just didn't really understand what was going on. And so at the end of that exam, the doctor was like, you know, in normal times, if we were not in COVID, I'd send you to get an MRI. But it's going to take forever to get an MRI. So she's like, would you be willing to go to the emergency room? And I'm like, sure, in the middle of COVID, I'd love to go to. So I spent like 10 hours at the emergency room in the heart of COVID. Nobody could be there with me. But finally got an MRI, and I was diagnosed pretty quickly, which I know doesn't happen for a lot of people, but I probably have had MS for a long time, and because I had old lesions and I had several new lesions that showed up. So my diagnosis was pretty clear. And so from there got a neurologist and all of the things. And that's kind of the beginning of my journey. So it was, kind of my journey of getting diagnosed was also wrapped up in the pandemic, which is kind of an interesting, unique little quality.
And how did we mentioned you started Overcoming MS quite quickly. So how did you come across Overcoming MS? And also I believe you've become a facilitator. So Why did you decide to do that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I found Overcoming MS because, so I'm a person that I like to know a lot of information and I like to research things. And we had a lot of time on our hands. So my practice was shifted to online. My kids are at home. You can't go anywhere. And I have this diagnosis. So I'm like Googling everything, right? And so found Overcoming MS pretty quickly from online search, read Dr. Jelinek book. I actually also found some stuff on Terry Wahls. So I think one of the pieces in the US is Overcoming MS is not as well known. It's not something that pops up as easily. We've got, some Swink stuff and Terry Wahls stuff. And so when I found Dr. Jelenek's book, and it just resonated with me just on a level of and so then I kind of dove in from there. Was there another question there?
And then, so you've become a facilitator as well. So why did you
do
that?
Was a weird come about. I was a part of a global circle because we didn't really have a circle that was really established in the US. and was just to kind of connect with other people. So I was doing that global circle, and somehow I had a conversation with this guy Sean, who was part of that circle, and he's like, "Wait, so because I'm a clinical social worker here, and I was a adjunct faculty for many years at the University of Denver, and have done facilitating," they were like, "Would you be willing to do this?" And I think for me, one of the things that I wanted to do that for is just to have more presence in the United States, just because, again, it was one of those things that I was learning about, and I was a part of this global circle, but it wasn't really like I was finding a lot of things here in the US around that. So for me, it was like, oh, this might be a good opportunity for me to share that information with people.
And so if you could give us some information using your expertise as a facilitator. So the first pillar, and the one that people know, overcoming MS, maybe the most visible pillar, is the diet one. So everyone notices that we eat differently. And so what are the overcoming MS recommendations for diet?
Sure. The diet is really a plant-based, whole foods diet rich in omega-3s. So it excludes dairy, meat, and it really minimizes saturated fats. So you're eating fruits, veggies, whole grains, beans, fish if you want to, nuts, olive oil, flaxseed oil, plant-based dairy, and egg whites. That's kind of the gist of it.
And any seafood at all, or specific fish, like prawns, shrimps, things like that?
I think all seafood is there. It's obviously, if you can, like salmon, sardines, things that are higher in, so like there's certain seafood that is better, but all seafood is kind of
the omega-3 sort of.
The omega-3s, yeah.
Yeah. And so if someone's coming to this from new, how can they get started with their overcoming MS diet? So if they're not currently plant-based, and they're not currently eating a whole food diet, they're going to the mall, the supermarket, and buying the stuff that we produce nowadays and call food. So how would you recommend people get started?
Sure. I think there's kind of like two avenues that I often hear. So one is kind of just, to dive in, to do it all, right, at one time. And so for me, that's what I'm motivated more that way. So when I started on this, I just kind of was like, I just want to do all of it, right? So I'm going to do no dairy. And other people kind of do it step by step. So you might start off by like, okay, I'm going to start with not doing dairy and kind of go with that for a while. And then I'm going to start with, then I'm going to let go of meat, and you can do it kind of step by step. One of the other things I would say in all of it that's helpful for me anyways was also just thinking about like adding more fruits and vegetables, because when I think about trying to get 6 to 9, and this is just in my 6 to 9 fruits and vegetables, then you kind of have to change your eating pattern anyways, because you can't start that at dinner. You have to start that at breakfast. So yeah.
And so to go through the pillars, the next pillar is vitamin D and sunlight itself. So what are recommendations for getting vitamin D?
The recommendations for getting vitamin D, which also have shifted a little bit recently based on new evidence, right, is supplementing 4,000 to 10,000 units of vitamin D3 per day. And it really depends on where you live and how much sunshine you get, which influences how much, supplementation. And then this other idea of getting about 15 minutes of sunlight 3 to 5 days per week, like being out in the sun. Yeah.
So that's before you slap on the sunscreen.
Yeah. So trying to, before you slap on the sunscreen, getting, a solid amount of, so that you can take in that vitamin D.
Because just a few minutes is not going to you don't want to burn, do you? But you
don't want to burn.
A few minutes and then, because that old advice, I think that our parents will have given us of like sunscreen goes on before you get anywhere near the front door. And so now it's maybe have 10 to 15 minutes, then do your sunscreen, then you won't actually get burnt, right? And is it possible to find out your vitamin D levels? Because you mentioned sort of it depends where you are, depends, I'm guessing, on your skin colour. So how do you find out what your vitamin D levels are, and what's the recommendations?
Sure. I mean, so typically, and I know they did this for me. I mean, I got a vitamin D level when I got all my blood work initially with my diagnosis. And so that may or may not happen, but you can also ask for that to get a vitamin D level. So it's a blood sample, and it'll give you your level so that you have kind of a baseline. And that's actually really helpful, because then you know kind of how to work with supplementation. Like for me, I actually need a lot of I need a higher level of a supplement, because my vitamin D was just slow. Like it did not go up very quickly. And so, the general recommendation is 100 to 150 nmol. So when you get that number, you'll get the blood test. You'll be able to know whether that, and in the States, that's 40 to 60 ng. So it's different. But you want to be, if you're lower than that, that's really what you're shooting for, to be somewhere in that range. And so once you know that information, then you can work with how to supplement that and how to get outside in, nature with sunshine, so that you can get that level too.
Yeah. And so to go through the pillars again, so the next pillar is exercise. And that's something where it can obviously be harder depending on your physical capabilities. So how much exercise do you need, and what type does Overcoming MS recommend?
Sure. So, people with MS really need the same as people without MS. I think the recommendation is really 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week. And so for people with MS, we need some cardio, we need aerobic fitness, we need resistance training a little bit. And that resistance training might be weightlifting, but it also could be like rock climbing, or it could be rowing. So there's different ways you can get resistance training in. And then we also need some stretching. And so we're trying to work up to, and so if you are not doing any exercise, right, you start slow and you build up, because you don't want to hurt yourself in the process. But eventually you're working to get to 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Kind of that's this optimal thing you're trying to work up to. And
so if people are, I mean, I'll use myself as an example. So I went from running, and literally I ran a marathon, I was rock climbing, I was surfing, I was snowboarding, and then now I can't run, my balance isn't very good, and there's things I can't do, that I can't surf because I can't pop up. It's just something that action I can't do. So then your motivation goes, because a lot of the sort of drive to do those things. So what would you say your tips are for staying motivated and to keep up that exercise routine?
I mean, one of the things I would say about motivation is just finding your why, right? So maybe your why is like, okay, I can't surf anymore, but I want to be able to do this, right? What's that next thing that, so figuring out the why, doing shifting, right? Pivoting. So it might be, okay, like I can't do that anymore, but what can I do? So instead of thinking like, oh, I can't do that anymore, so I'm going to do nothing, it's shifting to like, okay, what is something I could do? And maybe also getting creative of like, maybe there's something like, oh, I've always wanted to learn about that, and maybe this is a time to do that. Yeah, I mean, I think, consistency of some sort is really important with exercise and MS, right? Being consistent with something, and maybe it's not what you used to do, but it's this new normal, and can I be consistent with that?
And one of the things I would say that's a lot of people have trouble with is the next pillar, which is mindfulness. So mindfulness and stress management, what are the recommendations for that?
Yeah, so the recommendation is really to do 30 minutes of stress management per day. And that could be meditation or mindfulness practices. I think about sometimes like just being in nature. We know there's such a healing quality of like being in nature in quiet space, listening to music. So there's different ways, we can do that.
So it's not you don't have to do a specific like Zen Buddhist meditation every day. It's quite open to do different stress reduction techniques.
Yeah, I think getting, like meditation is great and it's wonderful. But there are different kinds of meditation, right? Being in nature and being quiet can also be a meditation. Like it's, so I think it's like getting out of this idea that it has to be one thing, and we can also sprinkle it in, right? We can do, so instead of thinking I have to sit down and I have to do 30 minutes of meditation, it might be like I do, 10 minutes and 10 minutes and 10 minutes or something like that.
And are there any tips you have for nervous system regulation and managing stress?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of them. I would encourage, people to, again, do small little things. There's a lot of like body centered things too, to work with that, just controlling your nervous system. Like hand on heart is a lovely one that kind of calms your nervous system a little bit. We kind of do it naturally when we're stressed out, but it's a good one. And, the goal is really working to respond to stress instead of react to it. So, and I would be remiss, because I'm a therapist, to not say like, having counseling or doing therapy can also be another way. I know initially with this diagnosis, there's so much anxiety about the what ifs, right? We hear about this, it's neurodegenerative, it's this future thing. And so I think getting some help around how am I going to manage that anxiety so that I can do some mindfulness and meditation. Because if our brain is really in that anxious, overwhelmed place, we might need to get some support around that to get to a place where we can do kind of some mindfulness and meditation.
And there's also a pillar on medication. Now, I think a lot of people assume that any program like Overcoming MS is anti any medication, because I know some programs are, but what is the Overcoming MS stance on a disease modifying therapy?
Yeah, it's really a both and approach, right? Medication is absolutely a part of this program if you and your healthcare provider believe it's necessary and helpful. There isn't any shame in using medication along with a healthy lifestyle. I do both. I'm on medication and I do the program.
And if people are not comfortable with medication, then equally, it doesn't mean you haven't. It doesn't count. You can.
If that's not your choice and that's not something that the doctor is recommending, this is your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the next one, going away from you as an individual, your family health. So it's now accepted that there is a link. They don't know exactly what it is, but there's a genetic link with MS. So what are the benefits of family members who don't have MS following the program? Would it be suggested that they also follow along?
Yeah, I mean, so yes, we've got this genetic element, right? It makes sense that these lifestyle choices, they're all about healthy living. So it doesn't matter if you have MS or you don't have MS or you're prone to heart disease. I mean, eating a low-fat, whole foods, a low-saturated fat, whole foods, plant-based diet is going to help with health regardless. So I think when you think about bringing that into your family, it just makes sense that it's just a healthier lifestyle, and it's, it lends itself to lots of different health changes, not just with MS. I know for me and my household, I had 2 teenage kids when I started Overcoming MS, and my husband, and so kids, especially teenage kids, it's harder to and that's, they are now in college and out of this household. But my husband and I, really his health has changed because he just, we're eating the same thing. And so it shifted even though he doesn't have MS.
So the worst case scenario is if it doesn't affect your MS at all, you're going to get healthier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. There's not a downside to like eating this way and having stress management and exercising. These are all the things that every single doctor would tell you to do, regardless of if you have MS or not.
Yeah. And so the final pillar is change your life for life. Mm-hmm. So firstly, what does this mean in terms of lifestyle management? What is that pillar?
Yeah, it really means, I think this is a lifestyle change. It's not like, I do this for a time, I change this for a period of time, and then things get better. It's really about, I'm changing my life, right? This is my new normal, right? So that's kind of, yeah.
So if people say to you, "Oh, how long do you need to be on a effectively vegan diet?" then
yeah, I mean, I would say this is it. And I would also say I know, and you also probably know this. I mean, I'm 5 years in now. In the beginning, I think it was harder, right? I was like kind of counting saturated fat, and, even though Dr. Dominic's like, you don't need to do that. I think all of us kind of struggle with that a little bit. And now I can tell you that it's just a lifestyle choice. These are just things I do, and I have less anxiety around it, and I have less anxiety around like, did I do that right? Did I do that wrong? It just is part of, who I've become.
Yeah. And so lastly, do you have any final tips for someone who's newly diagnosed with MS, or maybe has MS and is new to the Overcoming MS program?
I would say welcome. This is such a great community of people who are offering positivity and hopefulness. Seek out community in some, find your tribe. So, that again was the Overcoming MS circle for me, was really helpful to be around other people. But finding, doing a pathways program or the retreat, or finding different ways where you can get more information about the program was really helpful. And Overcoming MS actually offers so many, options that are at no cost to people to like, let's hear what the, program is. And I think over time, hearing those things and implementing them, really paying attention to how your body feels, right? Like when you tune in, you start to notice shifts and changes, and that's also going to be a motivator to keep going. I mean, I know for me, when I tune in, I'm like, oh, this really has changed, or I do feel more energy, or, so again, it just kind of reinforces like, yeah, I'm on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And with that, thank you very much for joining us, Heather O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find useful links and bonus information there. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And please rate and review the show to help others find us. This show is made possible by the Overcoming MS community. Our theme music is by Claire and Mab Dean. Our host is Jeff Alex. Our videos are edited by Lorna Greenwood. And I'm the producer, Regina Beach. Have questions or ideas to share? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. The Living Well with MS podcast is for private, non-commercial use and exists to educate and inspire our community of listeners. We do not offer medical advice. For medical advice, please contact your doctor or other licensed healthcare professional.